Welcome, class. This is your professor, Dr. Jason Finley, and welcome to Severe and Hazardous Weather Online. Some of you might be enrolled in Geography 23 or Meteorology 5. They're the exact same class. So this is Chapter 0, and I want to just give you some highlights on some things that we will talk about eventually throughout this course. So when you think of severe weather, you might think of tornadoes, and we will talk about tornadoes later on in this course. This last Thanksgiving of 2019, I visited family in Arizona, and I was only a mile away from a relatively weak tornado. Tornadoes in Arizona are quite rare, especially in the wintertime. And if you don't know already, California can also have tornadoes. A little bit more common in Arizona are dust storms. So what you're seeing here is a thunderstorm that has an outflow boundary, wind that's flowing out of the thunderstorm, picking up dust and carrying it across the valley in Phoenix. And this is quite common, again, in desert areas like Arizona. Something else that we will get into in this class is drought and climate change. A few years ago, well, it's been almost 10 years ago now, we started this multi-year drought that extended for most of the last decade. As you can see, these are some pictures of California reservoirs that have been depleted because of the drought. In fact, as of August of 2016, much of California was in drought, and Los Angeles County was in the worst drought category, the exceptional drought category. Now, there are other climate-related factors that can lead to either floods or droughts, and we will get into more in terms of climate change or in terms of El Nino and La Nina later in this course. So as of January of 2020, most of California is out of a drought. However, we are having a very dry winter. So parts of northern and central California are back into the abnormally dry category. Let's hope we get more rain this winter, especially as we get into March, so that we can stay out of any kind of drought category. Now to switch gears here, a little bit more traditional severe weather is lightning. Technically, lightning isn't a severe weather phenomenon according to the National Weather Service, but we're looking at both severe and hazardous weather. California does not get a lot of lightning, as you probably know. However, back in July of 2014, we had a deadly lightning strike on Venice Beach in July. Now, if we're going to get lightning, it's mostly going to happen in the wintertime. So a July lightning storm at Venice Beach is extremely rare. This figure here is showing you lightning fatalities from 1959 to 2013. Now, California has had 32 deaths from lightning, but look down near Florida, 471 deaths. Florida has more lightning than any other state in the United States. So how do lightning fatalities occur? Usually during leisure activities, especially if they are near the water. That's what the figure in the lower left is showing. And then in the figure in the upper right is fatalities from 2006 to 2015, so it's a little bit updated. You could still tell that Florida is basically the lightning capital. Now here's an interesting fact. Most people actually survive lightning, but they usually are unfortunately pretty injured in some form. Speaking of weather fatalities, this is something that we'll talk about as we get into this class a little bit more. You might think of weather fatalities occurring because of tornadoes or hurricanes or even winter storms, but technically heat. If you look at the 10-year average on this diagram, heat is the #1 killer. And this isn't just for the United States, this is for around the world. And Southern California can experience extreme heat. So that's something that we will also touch upon as we get into severe and hazardous weather. By the way, the National Weather Service has rip currents as a weather fatality. Rip currents is not weather. Going back to tornadoes, we have a handful of tornadoes every year that do quite a bit of damage and unfortunately also lost human life. But it's really the large tornadoes that do that damage, and they're actually quite rare. The large tornadoes, though, like what you see here in Oklahoma, sometimes can only be survived by going underground. This might tell you why. The extreme tornadoes basically levels all houses. You can see just a flattening of these houses, and it's just absolutely devastating to see this. I saw this firsthand when I was storm chasing back in 1999 near Oklahoma City. In addition, other parts of the Midwest and even the East Coast can get tornadoes. Indianapolis once had a outbreak of tornadoes that destroyed this Starbucks. I was in the area at the time, but I did not take that picture of that Starbucks. But it just goes to show how quickly some of these tornadoes don't last very long. They last on average about 10 minutes. But look how quickly it can do quite a bit of damage. So because we live in California and we don't get a lot of severe and hazardous weather, you might be wondering what exactly is severe or hazardous weather. Well, there's a few definitions out there, but I thought I would just sort of give you my version of a definition and go from there. So severe weather, and I'm including this as hazardous as well, is any kind of weather condition that is hazardous to either human life or to property. And this includes thunderstorms, tornadoes, hail, flood, winter storms, even freezing rain. You might be wondering, why freezing rain? Freezing rain can lead to ice storms, which can be very hazardous, especially for driving, and strong wind. Now we have strong wind here in Santa Ana winds, so that's something you could think about when it comes to severe and hazardous weather. So what we're going to do in this class is we're going to first go over some basic knowledge about weather and climate, and then the second half of the class we will talk about specific severe and hazardous weather types. This is my list so far. We may not get to everything. We'll have to see, but I definitely will be talking about thunderstorms and tornadoes and hurricanes, and then probably add in there hailstorms, lightning, and downbursts. All of those are basically focused on thunderstorms. But we can't forget about the hazardous weather, like floods and drought, extreme heat, even blizzards, and mountain windstorms, which we'll talk about in reference to the Santa Ana winds. So I want to talk about what exactly is not weather and climate. Again, because we're in California, we may not know exactly what constitutes weather or climate. Things that are not going to be talked about in detail here in this class include earthquakes, volcanoes, tsunamis, meteor impacts, landslides, and geomagnetic storms. I actually talk about these in my physical geography class, but for this severe and hazardous weather class, we will not have time and it doesn't fit the scope of the course. Thank you and see you next time.